You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Thursday. We're back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. We're doing a little late. I didn't get home until late. Went to the press conference. I haven't written anything on that. I went thrifting, trying to find furniture for the new house because there are things that I have and things that I don't have. That was the benefit of not living alone before, was that there were things that I didn't have that I didn't need, and now I need. So I went thrifting. We're gonna see if my new hobby that I haven't started yet of furniture renewal. We're gonna see how that works. Furniture flipping, but for myself. Today's Thursday, so we're gonna do the mailbag for the first time ever, the day that is actually designed for. But we're gonna start off with our leaders and best, starting with James Crudup at James Crudup 6. Don't want to be like Michigan State last year and hang recruiting banners in the spring, but even with your objectivity, do you still get a little joy from OSU fans' reaction to Jordan Marshall? I want to clear one thing up. When it comes to Ohio State, now I'm more objective than a Michigan fan might be. Absolutely. I've known guys that play for Ohio State, coaches that have been at Ohio State. It doesn't factor in too much for me, right? Like, they got some good guys over there. I've thought that for a while, even basically back since I started covering the team. But I am not objective when it comes to Ohio State. I think that there's a little bit of a rivalry, even just between the media and the Ohio State universe, because in large part, I think it's driven by their media, because whenever it all starts back, and I'm going kind of roundabout with this, 2016. And the funny thing is these are friends of mine, Steve Hellwagon and Dave Biddle. These are friends of mine, but I was at 24/7 Sports and they had me on whatever podcast. I don't know if it was Bucknuts Morning 5 or what it was. They had Steve Lorenz and I on to discuss the upcoming 2016 matchup, the week of the game. And they asked me just for like an opening statement or whatever. And I said, Michigan has the number one secondary in the country, the number one pass defense in the country, I believe I said. And they got all kinds of mad. They're like, you mean to tell me that you think Michigan has the number one pass defense in the country? And I'm like, well, yeah, because statistically that is true. And that's from friends of mine. That's from like friendly fire in a way. So, and then you get the unfriendly fire, then it becomes even that much more. So yes, I do take joy, especially because that week of the Ohio State game, and heck, I mean, even in the comments on YouTube here every now and again, I haven't looked at I'm sure yesterday's show has a bunch of really nasty comments. Maybe it doesn't. Lately, I've been pleasantly surprised. But usually Ohio State people find the podcast and they have things to say. It's like all ad hominem attacks. It's never like, I disagree with your point. It's always something like, you look stupid and all of that kind of stuff. So it's really obnoxious. So yes, do I want them, and I don't want them to feel pain in the real world, right? Like I wish them well in life. But when it comes to the happiness that's inextricably tied to their sports team, I want them to be miserable. So, yes, I do get joy from that. No Josh Barr this week. My brother in metal, Michael Wolf at MWolf21. I'll answer your DM. I saw your DM while I just got in and was like putting food away and stuff like that. But I haven't had any cigars at all in like I think the last time I had a cigar was the day before the Big Ten championship game. And in large part, it's because, I haven't been smoking as much, but in large part, it's because I've been dealing with the ramifications of this ear infection that I don't know if it's gone away yet or not. I know that there's been pain in my ears, but I don't have a sore throat. I'm not coughing. So your actual question, and by the way, the cigar that I had was the Blackened by Drew Estate, the Metallica cigar. Ironically, I bought one for Anthony Broom. It was in my coat, and I pulled that coat's been sitting in my car. I pulled that. I bought a couch today, and I had to move some stuff around to fit it in the back of my Durango. In fact, in the back of Murder Bus, and I pulled that cigar out so it wouldn't get smushed. And it's not it's not a humidor or anything. It's just been chilling in a coat pocket. How big is it that Michigan is pulling high-rated recruits out of Ohio? Where do you predict the 2024 class to end up ranked? I think there'll be a top 10 group. It's a little early for me to say that they'll be top 5 per se, because NIL still exists in the state that it does. I think Michigan's going to overcome a lot of that, but you look at like Georgia with 3 5-stars. I think you're going to see other schools have that type of thing. I don't think Michigan's going to necessarily have 3 5-stars. Maybe they'll have 2. As far as Michigan pulling high-rated recruits out of Ohio, I mean, I did a whole show on that yesterday. It's giant. And I talked to Clayton Safey about this after the press conference. Michigan has an opportunity to put their foot on the neck of Ohio State right now. And it starts with the recruiting. If you can pull one or both, I mean, if you pull both, Bryce West and was it Aaron Gates? If you pull both of those guys, I mean, Ohio State better beat Michigan this year. Otherwise, Ryan Day's gone bye-bye. And if they don't beat Michigan, even if those guys are committed to Ohio State, there's a good chance that Michigan can flip those guys if Michigan stays in their ear. So it's huge. You can completely turn things over and around at the moment. Jimmy Whitner at Jimmy Whitner 1. Do you think this recruiting class will finish in the top 5? I know it's the same kind of question. I think it has the potential to. Again, I have to see more, and you can't be loading up on 3 stars like that's your job the way that they did last year. They've got a couple in this class, but to be in the top 5 nowadays, I feel like you need. I wonder if I still have this screen up. If I do, I'm going to try to look it up here. So let's go to 2023. So Michigan has 3 3-stars right now. Alabama last year won. They had the recruiting rankings. They had 1 3-star. Georgia had 4. Texas had 7. Oklahoma had 9, but they had 3 5-stars. And then you're looking at 5-stars. Those same schools, 9, 5, 4, 3. Ohio State had 1 5-star, the only 5-star in the conference, but only 1 3-star. LSU had 7 3-stars. Miami had 7. So you got to be in the top 5. Either you have to bring in a ton of 5-stars, or at least more than you normally have. Michigan averages, I'd say, probably 1 a year. But usually they get 2 and every couple years or so. And you've got to limit the amount of 3-stars. You need to bring in a lot of 4-stars. So I think that's the big thing. And if they do that, then yes, they can end up top 5. And right now they're trending towards it. Number 2 in your mind, who will be our starting kicker this year? I still say Tommy Doman, but I mean, Adam Samaha is going to get a shot, but he's not on campus yet. So number 3, how excited are you about moving into a new house? I am so excited. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'm more excited now that I have a couch. It's a love seat, but it's a big love seat. It's a West Elm Harmony. Here's the weird, funny thing. And, again, all glory to God. I was laying in bed last night. I couldn't sleep per usual. It was somewhere 3, 4 a.m. ish. And I'm on my phone and I'm on the West Elm site looking at the open box Harmony and trying to put together a sectional, and I can't find matching fabrics and all of this stuff. And because I don't want to pay like $5,000 for a couch. Number 1, number 2, I really don't want to pay, a lot of money, more than $2,000 anyway. And those couches cost a ton. So I'm sitting there flipping through and trying to figure out exactly how I can make that work. I'm going to Facebook Marketplace, and I'm favoriting. I favorited one outside of Cleveland. That was what I want is the sectional, the like 114-inch sectional with the chaise. And there was one that was in just outside of Cleveland for $1,800, and I'm like, okay, maybe in a couple months, if it's still up there, maybe I could offer $1,500. I'm sitting there working it out. Today, after the press conference, I decided to go to the thrift store in Ann Arbor. I walk in and I see a West Elm Harmony love seat, the 76-inch, just sitting right there for the taking, so I picked that up. That's made it a lot. The reason why I tell you that's made me feel a lot more excited because it's not having a couch that I wanted. Not, I have all my money right now is tied up into the house as far as the down payment and all of that stuff. So I was feeling really frustrated, and now I feel a lot less frustrated because this love seat's probably the same size as the couch I had when I was a student in Ann Arbor because it's that wide. Zuri is super excited about it. It's in the garage upstairs, and she just went and jumped all over it. KRT at Farmark84. Clearly, fans are disappointed in Michigan's NIL approach. However, in the first years of the Harbaugh era, most eligible players left early for the draft. Now talented and experienced players are returning. What are your thoughts on the impact of NIL as a whole on Michigan football? I mean, you nailed it with the, like the 1 more year fund. Those are guys that might have jumped early regardless of, we've seen people might say, well, no, they're not all necessarily first round picks. Well, that hasn't necessarily mattered. We've seen guys like Chris Hinton leave and not get drafted. You know what I mean? So hasn't necessarily mattered. So when you have guys coming back and you have the transfer portal, which Michigan's taken full advantage of this offseason, it doesn't matter quite as much as it would have if those things weren't happening for the Wolverines. So NIL seems like it's starting to get fixed. Sounds like it will probably be fully fixed before too long. Certainly recruits like Jordan Marshall are confident enough in what Michigan's doing that they feel fine about it. You got stuff like, where every player benefits, like this upcoming Valiant Management Pep Rally, the hours before the spring game. So, there's a lot that's working for the Wolverines at the moment. Jonathan Joseph at JJoseph2156 finishing out segment 1. Do you think Harbaugh will name his replacement whenever he decides he's ready to retire? I don't think it works like that, to be honest. I don't think that he might say, here's who I would like my heir apparent to be. I just don't think that he's going to have that type of plenary power to be able to say, here's my replacement, so that's it. I think that it, in a way, whoever he wants would probably end up being the guy if it's someone who's already on staff, if it's like Sharon Moore or Mike Hart or someone that's already on staff. But who knows what the landscape of college football will look like? Who knows if whoever is going to be on staff when he does decide to move on in one way or another. But I just don't think that that's how it'll come down to be honest. All right, let's move on. We've got plenty more. We will get to those momentarily. Before we do, the tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I wish I had ESPN pulled up here because I want to see what the score of the Michigan State and Kansas State game is. I digress. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 as bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockdown. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel. 13-ish minutes, and yet I feel like that was the shortest we've done the Victor's Valiant in a while. And we didn't even have everybody. Missing Jimmy Whitner. Or sorry, not Jimmy Whitner, Josh Barr at Jadeke. Anyway, let's move to our Victor's Valiant. Jim at Jim in the North. I'm nervous about the defense next year. Speak comfort to me, please. Why are you nervous, man? There's no, do you think, is there anyone that they lost from the defense that you're like, man, can't live without them? Now, yes, they lost like 4, guys, Mike Morris, Mozzie Smith, and both cornerbacks. But everyone else returns. Mozzie and Mike are a big deal to lose, but Michigan won against Ohio State, Purdue without Mike Morris. He didn't seem like he was a big impact player in the TCU game. Chris Jenkins has been a little bit more effective at getting to the quarterback and things of that nature. They've got the guys to come in and back them up. And like Will Johnson is probably an upgrade at cornerback. If Amarian Walker is the real deal, he's probably an upgrade. You've got All the linebackers returning, plus Nakai Hill-Green back from injury, plus Ernest Hausman. You got all three safeties. What's there to be nervous about? It's year 2 of Jesse Minter, year 3 of the defense. This defense should be better than last year, not worse. Do you think the steps Michigan has to take with NIL will slowly poison the culture? What if they jet a kid in who's getting a ton of money? Will there be pressure to play him? Michigan's not going to take that type of approach. So other schools are, and they might, but no, Michigan. That's not what Michigan's going to do with NIL. They just aren't. And it's meritocracy, right? They're trying to make it a meritocracy. They're never going to do pay for play. How do you think Glasgow will do with the Lions? I haven't watched him with the Broncos in years, so I couldn't tell you. But I mean, he's a good player. Still looks in shape. I ran into him in Ann Arbor not last summer. Or was it last summer? No, it was the summer before. Ran into him in Ann Arbor, talked to him for a bit. I actually didn't know that he knew me because I only covered him for 1 year. And I was pretty new. I wasn't officially at 24/7 Sports, but we talked for a bit, and I'm sure he's really happy to be back, but I really honestly can't answer that. All right, let's move on. James Kovalevsky at Coach_Kovo. Teams like Notre Dame and Georgia Tech have been named as potential targets if the Big Ten expanded again. At this point, there is no cap on the number of teams in a conference, or is there no cap on teams in a number of teams in a conference, or would less profitable teams and markets need to be removed to add more? I don't think there's a cap, no. Notre Dame makes sense. It's the most Big Ten team out there that's not in the Big Ten. Georgia Tech makes sense if you're trying to add the Atlanta market, which obviously would help with recruiting and all of that stuff. Georgia Tech's not the big deal it was when I was younger, especially like Georgia's a heck of a lot better in a lot of ways as well. Remember, I don't like Georgia Tech because of my childhood affinity for Georgia. But no, I don't think they're going to drop teams. I think they're just trying to create a mega conference, which I guess I'm ambivalent about. I don't love it. I don't hate it. That's kind of where I'm at. Mark Z at Mark Zimke. What 3 players from the last 20 years would you bring back to play in the Minter defense? Who do you think would have thrived? That's really difficult. In 20 years, I don't know that I can go back that far. My memory doesn't work very well. I don't know who necessarily would have thrived. Devin Bush would be one. Easy. Having a linebacker like that able to do what he was capable of doing, that makes all kinds of sense. This was 1 year before the Minter defense. I'd say Aiden Hutchinson. That feels like cheating. But Aiden Hutchinson, I am going to cheat. Because he thrived in the Mike McDonald defense. If he had another year of it, it would be insane. Number 3, I feel like I got to go for someone from 2006. Lamar Woodley. I think Lamar Woodley would be pretty good in it. I don't know. I'll have to ask Lamar what he thinks. If he feels like he'd thrive in it. I'm sure he would feel that way. I probably won't see him till September, so wait for that answer. Perry Mitchell at Perry Mitchell 08. How important is the passing game in spring practices attended by guys like Jaden Davis and 2025 5-star QB Bryce Underwood, or is it just Kirk Campbell selling them on he and Sharon Moore's vision for them in Ann Arbor? To be honest, I don't know because I haven't talked to either of them. I'm sure that they've gotten to see some practice and all of that. We do kind of know to some degree based off of Ronnie Bell's comments about the new offense. So I would guess that there's a little bit more of a passing emphasis, but in spring practice, probably more so even because you don't have Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum available to you at the moment. So it's probably a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I'm sure they're getting to see some things, and I'm sure JJ looks really good. And then you add in the fact that it's just selling the vision and going from there, and then being able to sell the past as well. Sell JJ, sell what they're doing, sell what they've done. All right. I skipped him to the top. It's first time asking a question, I believe. My friend Josh Wiegand, at Josh D. Wiegand, a pastor over at my church, the Freedom Center. Emerging leaders on the team, best guess at team captains. It's kind of difficult. We talked to both Jack Tuttle and AJ Barnard today, who are both team captains, and we've learned last year that just because you're new doesn't mean that you're going to be a team captain, or that you won't be a team captain, because Olu became one. I feel like this is going to be a team with like 6 captains. So I'm going to name 6 guys, and I feel like that's appropriate. Mike Sainristil still is a returning captain. I will keep him there. Defensively as well, I would say Chris Jenkins, and I'll also go with Nikhai Hill-Green just because he screams captain to me. I mean, there could be some others that step into that role. But on defense, I feel like I feel like that's kind of the gist of it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Junior Colson was one. On offense, 3 there. I feel like there has to be an offensive lineman. I would probably go with, I'm torn between Trevor Keegan and Zach Zinter. I want to say Zach Zinter, but I kind of feel like Trevor Keegan would be that guy. Something about him tells me he would be a captain. Blake Corum, I think, would be a team captain. And let's go out of left field and say AJ Barner. I could see him being a team captain as well. And it's just guesswork at this point. Sometimes it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Sometimes it's a big surprise. Spencer Whitmore, who is your current Final Four? Assuming you're meaning for football. I don't know yet. I feel like some teams will take a step back, some teams will take a step forward. But the problem with like Alabama and Georgia, I think Georgia will probably be in there, but I don't know, like, sometimes you reload and it isn't quite the same, especially when you had a guy like Stetson Bennett who ended up being really, really good for them. I don't know that they'll have a quarterback that's of that caliber. I feel like maybe they're being placed a little too high, but I could still see them being like the 4th best team. Alabama, they were kind of a disaster with I don't know what his name is, the guy who is likely to start for them. He played against Texas A&M this past year. I listened to that game on the way home, and they were just a disaster. The defense has been a disaster. They lost both coordinators, not that it was that good anyway. So I don't think that they'll be. I think annoyingly Ohio State might be in the Final Four just because I don't think they'll lose a lot of games. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to restart this. I'm going to say Michigan. I think Michigan will end up being number 1. I'm going to give Tennessee a spot. I'm going to give USC a spot. Their defense awful, but another year of Caleb Williams, it's going to be impressive, I think. And I think I'm going to go with Texas. I think having Arch Manning there to push Quinn Ewers is going to pay off for them. And if Quinn Ewers was lighting it up before he got injured against Alabama. But they have to play Alabama, I believe. So it'll be interesting. Data Guy FL at Data Guy FL. How good is Michigan's second string team? Assuming that JJ would still be the QB, how many 2023 games do you think the second string team would win? I shouldn't do this because we're already at like 20. I can't see it from here. 23 minutes. I'm gonna tell you who I think the second string team would be. So you said JJ still the starter. Second string running back would be Donovan Edwards. So that's pretty good. Second string wide receivers would be, let's say, Darius Clemens, Tyler Morris, and who else? I need to add one more, right? We'll just stay with those two and go 2 tight ends here. Second string tight ends. If I had to go with this, we're talking Matthew Hibner. I'll still throw AJ Barner in there. We'll call Colston Loveland the starter. And we'll just add AJ Barner as a secondary guy. Second string offensive lineman would be. Let's see here. Let's go. I did this the other day and I'm already forgetting. Well, let's go something like Miles Hinton. I know he's probably right side. So let's go Trente Jones at left tackle. I know that seems weird. Trente Jones, Giovanni El-Hadi, Raheem Anderson, because I still think that Drake Nugent will win that job. Reese Atterbury, come on strong lately. And Miles Hinton. So that offense would be okay. It would do pretty good, I think. Offensive line would still be strong. That's the important thing. Defensively, that's where it gets a little murkier. Inside, we're talking probably Rayshon Benny and Kenneth Grant. Outside, we're probably talking Derek Moore and Josiah Stewart. Linebackers might not be that bad. Ernest Hausman and Nikhai Hill-Green. Safeties would be R.J. Moten, even though he's like a third starter. It would be R.J. Moten and someone like Keon Sabb, who we know nothing really about. And cornerbacks, where it would be kind of more scary, but I can throw Jaden McBurrows in there since Amarion's considered a starter at the moment. And but behind him, I mean, who? Miles Pollard, I guess. Defense wouldn't be quite as good, but it could probably hold its own. I think considering the non-conference, you might lose to Penn State. You might lose to Ohio State. You might not. Having JJ is a good equalizer, but could fare. I'd say it would probably be 10-2. Jacob Shavaria at Shavaria. Who does Juwan need to bring in to run a better offense? Are you kicking yourself not locking into that 2% mortgage interest rate in 2021? First with the Juwan to run I don't know enough about like assistants and things of that nature. I don't know that you need to necessarily bring someone in. You just need your players to. I think he runs good sets still. I just think that the players made a lot more mistakes this year. As far as the mortgage interest rate, while I am thankful for whatever reason, my interest rate's at 5.7, which is under what it's. I think it just went up to like 7.1 or something like that. So I don't really get how that works. So I'm thankful for that. But I just saw a post on like Instagram saying that people who bought a house in 2021 for $600,000 are paying the same on their mortgage as someone who paid $395. That would have been nice. I'm not paying as high as either of those, but it would have been nice to have a much lower rate. Hopefully they come back down and I can refinance. Gary Moore at GDog 4UM7. Why is JJ saying the offense will be better with Sharon handling all the play calls? Probably just because there's just one person cutting through the noise less. Y'all were really upset for a lot of it with the whole, two play callers, all that kind of stuff. I think that it becomes more cohesive generally, though, when you do have just one guy. I have no problem with the two play callers of it all, but I guess he's probably saying, and I didn't see this quote you're talking about. I'm guessing what you can read into it is all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to put into it. And I'm not slamming Matt Weiss at all. He was a really good guy to me. But I just think having less noise is probably going to help. Finishing us out in segment 2, Noah Niedlander at Candor_4_sale. Is Michigan entering an era of total dominance over Ohio State? Will we be destroyed by our own hubris? Do we even care? I think it's going to take a while before the self-destruction of hubris, but certainly feeling like it could be entering that era. Michigan needs to win this one this year. And then you can lose the next one, and it might give Ohio State hope. But you can just come back and win another one, and suddenly, and it's really, you're just putting your foot on their throat. So, gotta win this year, though. All right, we're going to continue on with plenty more here momentarily. All right, we are already at the 30-ish minute mark. I deleted a bunch of questions that were just either whining or whatever. FYI, if you don't hear your question, there was like 3 or 4 I deleted. JT at JT_Wall Street. Will Jaden Davis actually sign with Michigan ever? Also asking is JP at JPayZ24. I have to squint my eyes to see that. Is Davis coming? So for JT, I mean, Davis is naming a top 5 on Friday, and a week from tomorrow he's making his announcement. So you can read from that what you will. I do believe Jaden Davis is coming. There's no one out there that thinks he's going anywhere else. Probably can't even pick a real contender for him at this point. Rob Holmes at Holmey_MJJ. Is the 85 scholarship limit even a thing anymore with NIL? If so, how are they going to get 85 guys who might be the biggest names to risk to transfer out? I'm never going to answer who I think could transfer out. That's just never going to happen. It's not NIL that's affecting the 85. It's the COVID year, because that's just an open free year. It's not like, hey, I mean, yeah, you can pay if you really wanted to walk-ons, but that's not been the case, for, at least not at Michigan. It's just the COVID year. There's still plenty of guys that, bulk of the team played that year. Not everybody, but guys like Blake Corum, Nakai Hill-Green, RJ Moten, all those guys got a free year. So Shane at Seamus0914. Do you think Cornelius Johnson will be wide receiver 1? Why did I read it that way? Next year. Felt like Roman Wilson got a lot of hype last offseason to start the year and then was sidelined even before his injury, hoping he can be the guy this year given his explosiveness. He wasn't really sidelined, but really after game 3, you didn't see as much Roman Wilson. And so game 4, essentially, and then he got his catch in game 5 and then was gone. I think Cornelius will continue to be wide receiver 1. I don't think that I think that they would ideally have him as a second guy, kind of like Devontae Smith was to like Jerry Jeudy, or, at that point. And sometimes that's more dangerous, oftentimes. But yes, I think Cornelius will be at least technically wide receiver 1 to start out the year. Professor Alex Friend at Anon4LifeQ. After the surge in recruiting from Ohio, does Michigan invade Texas next with Tatum? And does recent news bode well for Jaden Davis, Michigan leader? We already covered that second part. I wouldn't say they're going to invade Texas. Obviously, they're strongly in the running for Taylor Tatum. I believe there's a couple other guys like Blake Frazier's from Texas. So I could obviously they're going to potentially get a couple guys from that state, but it's not going to be like, I think Ohio, they could finish. They have 4 guys from Ohio right now. I think they could finish with 7. That's the crazy part. They could finish with 7. It's wild. I mean, they could finish technically with 8, I think. Am I missing someone? So they've got 4 right now. Brian Robinson is likely to be number 5. Then actually they could finish with even more. So 5 for Brian Robinson. Then let's say, like I mentioned, Bryce West, Aaron Gates. That would be 8. I don't necessarily think that they're going to land both, one or both, but I think that there's a chance. And heck, they might even be able to do the Armstrong twins. That could get you up to 10, which would be wild. I think what it takes is they need to get a guy like Bryce West to fall. If they do that, they could really invade the state. They could make it a thing. Just kind of like remember the back in the day, what year was it? It was like 16, 17 or something like that. The New Jersey to Ann Arbor pipeline. All these guys from New Jersey decided they wanted to play together in Ann Arbor. They could do something like that. And I'm sure that's what they're trying to do. Paulus at, I'm not going to say your name, blanking poser. Over 10.5 regular season wins and why. I'll hang up and listen. I mean, over, if they're under, that seems like a disaster at this point. But I mean, granted, they could lose at Penn State and to Ohio State. It's unless there are injuries, given the depth of this team and experience, especially compared to those two teams, I just don't see it personally. That's why. I've covered it pretty exhaustively to this point. Let's Toast Media. Is it Natty or bust? And that's an appropriate. It's not necessarily apropos, but an appropriate next question. I wouldn't say it's necessarily win the national championship, although this might be your next best chance, because you might have a couple years where you're not quite as good. Maybe. I think is at least get to the national championship game, but that probably was this last year. So yeah, I think it is probably Natty or bust. Ronan Sports Talk at Ronan Sports Talk. What areas, examples, NIL, facilities, locker room, staffing, resources within the football program from your perspective do you think could be improved that would help this program reach the next level. I mean, obviously NIL, locker rooms, I think probably could be improved. The facilities probably do not. They already have the biggest weight room in the country, unless you want to add like water slides and things of that nature. But staffing, I think they need a bigger recruiting staff. And resources, I think they've got plenty of resources. Clark at Blue for Life 8. Do you think Jay Harbaugh stays at Michigan as long as Jim does, or could you see him leaving for another job, like if he joined the Ravens or got an offensive or defensive coordinator at another college? I mean, he hasn't left so far. No one's really sniffed around, which I think is the interesting thing. I don't really know the answer to that unless you hear, because like you've heard of other coaches, Minter with the Eagles, Mike Hart with, was it Western Michigan? You've heard other coaches being sniffed around. For some reason, I've never heard of anyone wanting to go after Jay Harbaugh, which seems crazy. Novacado at Tristan Novak. What's your 5-year outlook on the direction of the team? I mean, it depends on this recruiting class, and it's kind of hard to say because you can always supplement with transfers as well. But this, if I was to kind of outline it right now, and can't really get to 5, I'd say this year's the shot. This is your opportunity to win a national championship. Next year, regardless of JJ coming back or not, probably a down year a little bit comparatively. Could still win a lot, but it's going to be a lot harder because you're definitely losing Blake Corum, probably losing Donovan Edwards. You're losing the guys that all came back via the one more year fund. Probably losing more. So you're going to see a much more depleted, especially if they win a national championship. The roster is going to deplete itself. So you're going to rely on a lot of guys we don't necessarily know about that are getting their first taste. I think that they could go back to being like 9-3. And then after that, say it's Jaden Davis or whoever at quarterback, second year, guys with a lot more experience. I think that they would probably go right back up to being an 11-1, 12-0 type team. I think that would maybe fall off or sustain itself to being 10-2, 11-1 the next year. And then I can't really say the 5 year. So I think they're in a spot right now where you have to capitalize. Like this is where it was disappointing last year in the recruiting. Didn't capitalize. Now if they can capitalize, then you start to get into that next man up thing, right? Like we've seen Ohio State, for instance, often it's like, oh man, they just lost 12 players in the NFL. Guess what? The players right behind them are just as good. Michigan, I still don't have the full confidence that that's where they're at yet. I do with the guys who are the next man up this year. But the ones behind them, I'm not sure yet. But that's what Michigan used to be. I remember I said this to like my grandma in like 2003 or so, maybe even earlier than that. I said, the thing that I love about Michigan is that every time you start to get disappointed about a guy leaving and say, how the heck is this next guy? I think it was in 2004 because it was Mike Hart. I said, as soon as you lose a Chris Perry, you think, how are you going to replace this guy? And then the next guy comes up and he's just as good, if not better. Michigan is starting to get back to that, but that hadn't been the case for a while. Joshua Carlson at Josh WFF 96. Who do you think the top 3 quarterbacks in the Big Ten will be next year in order? Not necessarily stats, but overall performance. That's kind of difficult because there's a lot of new blood. JJ McCarthy is going to be my number 1. I don't feel like I have to explain myself there. Behind them, it's a little more difficult. I'm going to go with Kyle McCord, number 2, even though I think he won't necessarily be like some crazy great quarterback, but just having the receivers he has, that'll help him out immensely. Number 3, I'm reticent to go Drew Aller because I just don't think we know. The running game should probably help them out at Penn State. Let's go Talia Tagovailoa. Let's flip those actually. JJ, Talia, and then although who knows how the Josh Gaddis offense will work with him, but let's go JJ, Talia Tagovailoa, I think, then Kyle McCord. So yeah, that's what we got. Scott Jones at Scotto 48706. Is this year's O-line better than the last 2 years' OL? I don't think so. I think last year's will probably have been better, but this probably is going to be better than 2021. Let me put it that way. Like I've said before, I think if it's Drake Nugent, he's somewhere in between Vastardis and Olu. I'm curious about the left tackle. Who, if that's Ladarius Henderson, I think he's got everything. And I do have to answer. Someone had said in the comments, like, haha, Ladarius Henderson is not going to be your left tackle. Yeah, that's what he was brought in to be, was the left tackle. So I'm not making that up, by the way. But then you got everyone else the same. I'm going to, it could be better. I'm going to predict that it's somewhere in between. Gian B at GB Thai Polo 1. Expectations for this defense. I kind of answered that. But I think it'll be better, to be honest. Right now, the onus is trying to get more pass rush from the interior guys. You're going to need to find it on the exterior as well. I think they have the bodies to do it. I think the linebacking core is actually a strength now. And I think the secondary is a strength. I think this defense is going to be better than it was a year ago, believe it or not. I think it'll be a top 3 defense in the country. B. Flay at Bobby Flay Bands. Could any college coaches hang with Harbaugh in American Gladiator? Oh, man. As far as the head coaches, let's see. Mike Gundy would be one that I would pick there. I definitely think Mike Gundy could be one. I'll add PJ Fleck. I think PJ Fleck could. He strikes me as a type of guy that could do that. Outside of those guys, I know I'm going to miss someone. I can't think of who, but like anyone, there's no one else that has the type of zeal that Jim Harbaugh has. All right, we're already over 40 minutes, which is a good 13 minutes overtime. Kirby Kime at K&J Kime finishing us out. Why do you think Michigan struggles in bowl games? How would you fix it? Sometimes they've played teams better than them. Georgia, for instance. Sometimes they've been shorthanded and haven't wanted to be there. Florida State, Florida in 2018. Add Alabama to the Georgia list. And then sometimes they overthink everything. South Carolina and unfortunately TCU. How do you fix it? Just do what you do. Don't do all kinds of crazy stuff. Just do what you do. Don't change anything. I know it's a much longer time, but we saw it against TCU. They did a bunch of weird stuff. Against South Carolina, they had a big lead, and then they did a bunch of weird stuff. They also didn't want to play in that game either. Against Florida, they didn't really have a chance because they just didn't want to be there. And you're missing a bunch of guys, but they just didn't want to be there, and Florida really wanted to be there. Kind of like Michigan and Florida in 2015, just reverse. You weren't going to be able to beat Georgia no matter what. And with Alabama, who didn't really want to be there, you just had to play a little bit better. But they just didn't. All right, that's going to do it for us. We'll be back on Friday. Who knows what we'll talk about? We'll figure it out. Thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Peace.